So how have things been?
Things have been weird, and not
What way?
necessarily in a bad way, but there was that what came up that I emailed you about
Yeah.
what earlier this week, and I don't know. Everything is just a blur,
Mm,
and I know that's not really a problem, but it does really kind of create this weird sense of it's almost like the moment is a bubble,
mm,
and whatever came before is now just only the vaguest of memories,
mm,
and whatever might come is it's like a distant possibility.
mm.
It just kind of creates this sense of, and it's not like there's not any sense of before, past or future, but it doesn't have the sort of substantiality that it did once upon a time.
Yeah.
I don't know when this changed, and I don't know, and not that it matters, but I don't know, what might have led to this. But yeah, there's just this weird sense of things being sort of semi-atemporal.
Yeah.
Is that an actual word? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not bad, but it does lead to feeling sort of disconnected. And then when you tie that together with that, and it's funny because I decided to start watching all the videos over from the very beginning.
Oh,
So
amazing.
I started with the very first Fetters 1 through 3 group. And
Nice.
in there, I'd mentioned, and I think it's come up on and off since then, that problem, or at least the concern over the fact that motivation for certain things just isn't present, and it's hard to get the motivation to do a lot of things. I think that I don't know. Well, I don't know why. Doing things like all the domestic stuff is easy. That comes fairly second nature for the most part. But everything else, just it's I keep hoping that it's going to start to come back online. I do things to try to cultivate it, kind of engender it, and it's helped a little bit. But anyway, so there's just sort of this peculiar sense of being out of time and not really being driven or motivated to do things. And I would understand it very easily if they were things that there was some resistance towards, or things that I didn't necessarily want to do. But almost all of them are things that I like to do.
Mm,
There's some sort of enjoyment in them. So it's really strange, to not feel motivated, or the lack of intention to go and do certain things. Well, I guess, like I was saying, you put that together with this weird sense of kind of being out of time, and it's just really sort of it's just odd. I don't know what else to call it.
yeah. I get that. The 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 being here now, sort of semi-atemporally, to put it, it makes complete sense. The less we are caught up in thought about things that have happened and we're replaying them, and the less we are imagining a potential future, then of course we're just left with what's here. And what's here is a constantly changing, constantly renewing, um, fresh experience that is very much like a bubble of this moment. And I understand what you mean about how it can be kind of, I think it's only strange in comparison to how we were used to living our life before.
Yes.
Like the idea that we're just so used to having this is me doing this task for the day, setting about all the things that I have to do, checking them off one by one, and keeping that sort of catalog of experience going, to just simply being where you are when you're there.
Yeah.
Then of course, you're I think that that bubble experience only makes sense as being different from the past if you are um considering the possibility of dragging the past through the rest of your day, or dragging what has already happened through the rest of your day.
Oh, that was interesting. The way you phrased that, though. Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. That's
Uh,
just the way you phrased that. It just that really kind of made me do a little bit of a double take. So you're
Wonderful.
right, though. You're absolutely right.
Um, so it might take some getting used to, because we're comparing that, this feels not as coherent as I'm used to, or not as well, so much of the sense of self that we took ourselves to be is being largely fabricated or reinforced by all of these past memories that we've had. And so the less you're engaging with that, the even less identification is happening throughout the day. And so it is much more just being a present awareness of something, as opposed to being this narrative self that's moving throughout the day. Uh,
Well,
Go ahead, because I was going to go to the motivation things, but before, if you have a question about that.
well, it's just the thing that I think makes it also adds kind of a an element of weirdness to it is the fact that it exists in kind of a vague sort of way or indistinct kind of way. In other words, it's not, somebody might think that, okay, you begin to work through a process of unraveling identification, and there are all of these sort of secondary effects. And so if the kind of thing that I just described, if somebody has heard that that's a possibility, at least I would imagine that automatically assume that it's fairly distinct, but it's actually really kind of indistinct. And there are other things that it almost is kind of like having one foot in each world. Because, for instance, I remember when my sense of time really kind of took a hit last fall.
Mm.
And I wish I'd made notes of what happened, but I kind of remember the moment, even though I can't remember the details. But in that moment of, there was sort of this inquiry that just sort of started happening. And then the culmination of the inquiry was this kind of moment of insight. Aha, whoa, wow, that's right, that's true. And then my sense of time became different. But even though my sense of time is different, it's really strange, because if somebody asks me what time it is, I can still tell them without looking at a clock. I can usually tell them pretty close to what the time is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't have that really strong, distinct, very, for lack of a better word, sort of concrete sense about it. It's now it's become somewhat vague and indistinct. And so the fact that it's not really hardly defined, very black and white, makes the whole thing a little bit weirder, because, we're talking about something where, boundaries are getting blurred, but what's blurring the boundaries itself is pretty indistinct.
Mhm. Yeah, love that. Love that. I mean, it is a thing where the if we had a self to begin with, and we were getting rid of the self, then we would really expect to experience a very distinct shift, where this tumor was there and the tumor is not here anymore. This thing is there, but that's not what's happening.
Right.
They're very subtle um I thoughts of there are very subtle beliefs and thoughts, and other thoughts which are creating something out of nothing, in a way. Like there's a thought about time, and these feelings that we have about time that have gone uninvestigated through most of our life. And the more we start to investigate it, I think also there's probably a biological aspect here, where the parts of the brain that control our sense of time also are related to or that create our perception of the sense of time, uh, are also involved with creating the sense of a self. And so I think there's also just some of that deregulation of those areas. So it tends to get messed up along with that feeling of self, the substantial self. So I think there's a correlation there also that's just purely physiological in the brain. Um, but so much of what we're doing is, investigating the minutia that is leading to a different way of experiencing the world. All of it is so subtle that to expect that there's going to be some really distinct, this thing is now all of a sudden missing that wasn't here before, and now everything is like sharply in contrast to the way that it was. It just isn't the way that it works. It's a bunch of very subtle gradations where you might have an experience or now and then like you have had and other people have experienced where it's like a very profound way of being that changes for a day or however long, and then it goes back to that same kind of normality except slightly different.
Okay. Yeah, and that reminds me of all the different ways that the Zen Buddhists would talk about, how awakening is ordinary and how, first there's a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is a mountain. All these different ways of expressing that it's different, but it's not, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, eventually your feet come back onto the ground, and it's a slightly different way of being in the world, which is different enough that it really undercuts all of the suffering and all of the stories and the beliefs about who we thought we were and what we think we want and don't want, and the distinctions that we make around this little bubble of an eye. All of that can be broken, and yet functionally, we're still the same basic person functioning in a world.
Right.
Nothing really changes. Uh, you're still in the same relationships. You're still in the same, having the same family. You still work the same job. Still in the same house. Your senses, though they can be perceptually screwy now and then, are still the basic five senses. It's not like anything. It's not like you can suddenly start to see in the infrared, yeah, or that you can, hear into the parallel dimensions or something. It's like, you still have the senses that you have.
Well, and don't take this the wrong way. This isn't
No,
meant
no,
as a challenge.
no, no.
But it's interesting you say that, and I think about when I took the Finder's course the first time, and one of the videos that Jeffrey Martin presents up front, at least he did at that point in time. I think it's also in his book too, his first book about that, the Finders. He talks about how some people, their marriages become difficult, or there's problems in maintaining relationships at work and maintaining just being able to go to a job and that kind of thing. So, and it's interesting because you said something in that very first Fetter Group video that I'd completely forgotten about, how these shifts are much more pronounced and profound for somebody who's coming to it fairly recently, as opposed to somebody like myself, and I'm going to assume you and Pernilla, where you've been meditating 10, 15, 20 years. You've really been investing a lot of time and energy in that process. And so for somebody like that, it tends to be much less, it's not as profound, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to what you just said about the Jeffrey Martin thing, it is also true that some people might find as they do this, I think it's not so much that the person going through the process changes so much that these things become, they're not able to function in the relationship or whatever, but that they start to realize the things that aren't working for them. We're able to be in really awful relationships when we have ways of just compartmentalizing it, ignoring what's here, not being really honest with the actual experience, living mostly in the mind. Um, a lot of times we're doing jobs that we really hate and we're just dragging ourselves there, and it's just an utter drag, and everything in our body is saying no, 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 no. Well, of course, once you start to get out of your own way in that, once you start to allow the body to basically do what it does, to listen to the cues that it's giving, and then a lot of times people will end up leaving relationships, changing jobs, doing that sort of thing. But that's just because they're really being more authentic with their experience and recognizing that they've been in some sort of situation which is just not good for them for any number of reasons. Um, and then it just becomes harder and harder to live in a way that is damaging or self-sacrificing or against our better needs or better judgment. We just become much more functional in that way.
Okay, that makes sense. I'd never really considered it from that angle,
Yeah.
but that actually is a little easier to swallow than this idea that somebody becomes so that they're experiencing such a rarefied state that it's hard for them to manage normal, mundane, day-to-day life.
No, not usually. I mean, we have, Pernilla and I have worked with multiple people who have, like, we've seen them get out of relationships, long marriages and stuff, or change jobs, and like it definitely happens because there's just enough awareness there that I can't cover this up anymore. It's like really being there's an honesty about the experience which becomes undeniable, and you just really start to feel um the discordancy or the dissonance between what feels right and what you're doing. And then inevitably things will change. Oops.
Right.
So
Okay. Well, we talked about discussing what I'd emailed you about earlier this week, and that's fine. At the same time, when we spoke 2 weeks ago, you never came out and said it and just outright, but I got the sense from things that you said that you were kind of nudging in the direction of, it's probably time to start looking at 4 and 5.
yeah, absolutely.
So, and that's fine. So if we just want to touch on this briefly, that's fine.
Mhm.
And I don't even know. I'm not even sure how much of an issue that is, because something you said in that email response kind of clarified things and made it easier to kind of be with it.
Yeah.
And I guess it was a couple of days after that email and after that whole experience happened that I got the sense that perhaps maybe that okay, everyone's going to misbehave all of a sudden. That it was something that was possibly coming up because it was needing to be processed.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't come up with quite that degree of intensity before.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming that the last time that you were actually went through the experience, that you probably weren't in a place where you were able to just completely be with what was coming up, just completely be okay with the situation as crumbling and potentially life changing as it was. I'm sure there was some amount of deflection and um, sometimes being with it, sometimes just being so embroiled with the situation that you weren't really able to just give it its full attention, to just play it safe self out and work its way through without feeding back more into it, because you were in the middle of a situation where you were creating the stories about it were being created, and I'm sure they were being believed in to a certain extent. And now you have the opportunity to recognize that the stories that are coming up are no longer relevant, right? They weren't about something that's happening now. It was something that happened years ago. And and you now just have some residual stuff in the body that wants to come out, and potentially some residual thoughts that are playing their way through. And then I think, because you had said basically that they're having these thoughts, these memories are coming back. But what was making it unbearable, I'm guessing, is that there's also a physical component to it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep. And so allowing that to just be there, to just play itself out, let the thoughts come through, don't feed into them, don't add more onto them, don't make a whole nother layer of story out of it, but just allowing them to just come through, feel the body, allow the body to express it however it needs to express it. If you have to move, shake, scream, cry, however it lets out, let it out. And then that's just the moment of expression. It's like we often talk about like emotions like weather patterns, but I think another way to think of it is maybe sort of like a volcano, where it's not that the volcano, this particular volcano erupts once every 20 years. It doesn't mean that there's like, you know, the next time, like it erupted 20 years ago, it's coming back again. It doesn't mean that there's like something about that eruption 20 years ago that is, coming back again and really needs to be, worked through. And I really need to talk about this previous eruption 20 years ago and the one 20 years before that. And, it's just, I think there's something about me that has to erupt every 20 years in order to you can make like a whole story for the, or it could just be the pressure happens and the volcano just erupts and it lets out what it needs to let out and then it's dormant again for a while. So you can have that bout of thought, that bout of sensation, and just allowing them to erupt and come out and just be freed from the pressure's released, whatever's locked in the body gone, thoughts come through. Don't put anything more onto it and make it into where for the next 20 years you're thinking about that eruption that happened, years ago and making a whole narration about it. Does that make sense? Is that a
yeah, yeah. It does.
reasonable comparison?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because it's that impersonal. We really want to make sure that we're not making this thing a personal issue. Whatever the thoughts are, whatever the sensations are, if we find that we are identifying with it and making it into a personal narration, we're creating that sense of self around something that just isn't that way. It's as impersonal as a volcano eruption or a weather pattern, a storm blowing through, a tornado being created by, the particular causes and conditions in the atmosphere at that moment. And then when those causes and conditions stop being there, the tornado disappears.
Yeah, I mean that's an appropriate metaphor for it. I guess I just it's kind of taking a second to sink in because,
Mhm.
like you said, it's impersonal. Well, it's sort of a strange thing to consider going from something that seems, and that's kind of the operative word, hyper. It seems
Yeah.
as opposed to actually is. It seems hyper personal and has so much weight and energy associated with it that to to suddenly take it and kind of turn off all of that personal stuff and treat it as something that as impersonal as a volcano eruption is I guess there's a little part of the mind that it's taken a second to catch up on that. So
It's the same sort of thing. We were talking because we were lying out in the hammock before, like I said, and just watching the trees were the wind was blowing, right? There's big gust of wind, and watching the trees all blow, and the hammock starts blowing with it. And lying there, it doesn't feel like there's anything here that's separate from the trees, the wind, the hammock moving. There isn't that personal element. It's this whole thing is just part of that natural wave of motion. And it was like I was lying there, and it's so clear that like even the death of this body and the arising of thoughts and the dying away of thoughts and the birthing of the body and the dying of the body and all of that, it's no more personal or distinct or detached from nature than the seasons changing and the leaves falling off the trees or any of that. It's all part of this same natural movement. And I was just like, and then the thought came up that and there are people who really believe that we have no connection to nature whatsoever. Like we are some weird uh um what do you call it? Like some sort of God created manifestation or something that's just like here, we're not animals, we're not part of nature. We have, we live in houses, we have our own little distinct things. And I mean, it just feels logically completely absurd. And I do not know how you square that circle, also but also, it's the same sort of thing that we do all the time with things like creating the personal nature of these memories and these stories. It's taking what is this completely flowing, impersonal reality of change and birth and death and nature going through its cycles, and there not being anything personal about the wind blowing the leaves and the birds flying on it and changing course and all of that. It's this same level of impersonality that there really isn't something here, somebody here who has lived these things in a way where it is reflecting on them, and that this thing has undergone all of these experiences, and that all of these experiences reflect back on this one who is in here someplace. There's all of that is just as as imposed on what is actually here as the idea that we have just been kind of plopped down onto the earth, completely separate from animals and the chimps that we share 99 point some percent of the DNA with and everything else. We have no connection to any of that. All just coincidence. um it's that kind of a thing. So it's just that much, it's just that impersonal.
That's funny to hear that idea, because that's an idea that's kind of been dogging my heels since I was about 15 or 16. And I remember the first time I encountered it, it was a book that a friend of mine handed to me. And the book was called The Impersonal Life. And the
Oh.
voice speaking in the book is communicating some of these kinds of ideas. And I remember at one point in time, after spending some time reading the book for a while, just kind of having this flash with regard to that idea. And I remember it was so horrifying. It scared the daylights out of me. I mean, I was just mortified beyond words. I remember getting up and leaving my room and going out in the backyard and grabbing the tree. We had this oak out in the backyard, and grabbing this tree and trying to feel the substance of the tree. And then one of our dogs came with me, and this is real, this is real. And fast forward all these years, and now you say that, and it makes perfect sense. And the idea is not, doesn't seem threatening in the least. If anything, it's very freeing. But it it's funny how it changes.
It is. I mean, 15 is really too young to be really engaging with that sort of thing to begin with, because
Mm,
we're so adamant about you have to have a healthy sense of a stable self and a stable world and all of that before you get to where you start to derail it and dissect it. And
mm,
so that I understand that. I understand that. Your brain still was years away from being fully formed, and it's
right.
the sense of self still did not have a kind of like biologically, just at the age that you were, you hadn't come to that yet. But then also giving your personal history of the background that you had
Mm,
where you didn't have that kind of stable, Yes, I am Darrell and I'm a wonderful person and everybody loves me. You didn't have that kind of stability anyway. So then
Right.
to have somebody or a book or something like ripping out, the last threads that you were holding on to for having some sort of stability in life, that's not really useful.
Yeah, good point. I hadn't thought of it that way. It makes more sense when you say, when you frame it that way, as to why it would be such a horrifying experience. But with regard to that situation with Susanna and I and everything, you know, getting upended back in 2020, it kind of falls into a category with two other things that I think it's all, Fetter 2 stuff. I know there aren't any fetters, but that's how we're understanding it. So,
Okay.
three things that seem to really just kind of still have a lot of weight to them, and that's one of them is the one we were just touching on, and then of course Tuesday's boyfriend,
Mhm.
and the other one is there's kind of this weird difficulty between Tuesday and I,
Mhm.
and more on her end than mine because she, for the life of me, I don't know how it works exactly. She's managed to generate all kinds of resentments and little stories about things that have happened, and either they're partly true, or in the case of some, they're Susanna and I are, it'll come up and we'll talk about it. Like, where is she coming up with this stuff? I mean, it doesn't seem to have any connection to anything that's ever happened in the world that we can recall, or sometimes it'd be a case of that's not the kind of thing that, Suzanne will say, I know that's not you. That's not the kind of thing you would do or say, So anyway, so, all that to say is, a certain percentage of it is generated on her end, and it is something that I guess affects our interaction. And we don't really have to try to take all of those things apart the way we have other issues. It really would be what I would find most helpful would be how do these things, if, because I know sometimes there's nothing to do, sometimes it's just you have to let things take time. But if there's something that can and should be done, what would be the thing to do about those issues? Because obviously those issues, and I think the big one, the one that I emailed you about, could be wrong, but sitting here right now and having spent some time kind of just being with it for the last 24 hours or so, it feels like all of that came up just so that it could get out.
Mhm.
So, but whatever the case may be, how would, what would make the most sense in terms of working with these things with an eye towards second fetter and trying to allow these things to release and go their own way?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good question. Um, First thing to ask is how are these particularly affecting you? So, for instance, the issue with Tuesday. So, you can see by what we talk about with the bubble of reality that how she sees you does not necessarily have any actual relation to how you see you,
Right,
right? So her perception of what you say and what you do and all of that is colored by her biases and her expectations and how she is interpreting the world through her own lens.
right.
What for you is the issue with her having some sort of resentment towards you and saying that you've said things that maybe you haven't said?
Well, the first thing that comes up, I mean, just out of nowhere, and I'm sure this isn't all of it, but the first thing that came up is it's not fair.
Mm.
The other thing is, I guess there seems to be this sense of that somehow being a threat, but what it's a threat to, not really sure. That's as much as I can say at the moment. It just seems like, on some level, it feels like a threat. So unfair, feels threatening in some way, and
Is that true? Is it really threatening towards you in some way?
that's a tricky one to answer. Um, if it just stays at the level that it's at, in other words, she doesn't start really making some outrageous claims,
Mhm.
then no, I don't think so. I mean, other than the fact that I guess it's going to be it's going to be difficult to have any kind of quality of relationship with her
Mm.
because that stuff's always getting in the way.
Yeah. But even that, the and understand, how what I'm saying here, but having the relationship itself still has to be a two-way street where both participants want it equally. And I understand that you want the relationship with her. If she is seeing you in a certain light where that ends up being her coloration of who you are, can you be okay with the relationship existing on her terms as she feels comfortable and as she sees you?
I'll say yes with a qualifier. Yes, in that I can learn to.
Yeah.
And I say that because I've been slowly learning to.
Mhm.
I've gone from, say, a month or so ago, really being troubled by how she sees me, how she feels about me, to at some point in time, kind of crossing this line into this, well, almost completely don't care what she thinks of me. I
Mm.
mean, not entirely. There's still a little bit of it left, but it doesn't have the intensity that it did, 4 or 6 weeks ago.
Excellent.
I say yes with that qualifier because already it seems to be in play that there's some ability to let go.
Good. It really has to come down to how you are, um, how you're feeling about it in terms of, do you feel like beyond the potential threat that, may or may not be there, is there something that feels like it's saying something about you that you would like for it to be, you would like to be seen in the light in which you feel like, you know, like for the person who you feel like you are?
So basically, what you're asking is, let me see if I got this correctly,
Mm.
that that she believes and is saying things about me that are not true and unfavorable, and that she's not, as a result, it's not supporting the idea I have of myself.
Mm. Well, not entirely that, but
Okay.
do you it's possible that she doesn't see you the way that you want her to see you. You have an idea
Oh,
of who you are and the way that you are and all of that. And then you would like for her to see you in the same light in which you see you. If,
Yes.
if that's not happening, is that part of the issue that you want to be seen in a certain way that you maybe are not?
I
If
don't know
it
if that, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, if it helps, what is the feeling like in the body that you get when she is saying something about you that you feel you've never said before, it's just not true, or that she has like an attitude with you that makes you feel disconnected or like you can't.
Oh, okay. Boy, when you put it like that, the whole thing comes clear.
Hmm,
Okay, well, starting with the direct answer to your question, what's being felt in the body, fortunately, I've made it a point to occasionally pay attention to that. And there's this tightness, there's this contraction right in here, and notice that most. And then I think there's also probably some into the neck and the face, but I really notice it right in here. And it seems to tie into that whole thing about being the bad guy.
mhm.
In fact, it's right out there in the open because I don't know how many times Susanna and I've talked about this a handful of times in the last few weeks. And I've used that phrase with myself. And then just last night, Susanna borrowed my language because she's having to learn to do more and more of this hard parenting stuff. And it's not something that's come easy for her at all. And last night, she said something about, well, now I have to be the bad guy. And she was just borrowing the words I use so much of the time.
Completely.
So that seems to be what it's about.
So now, can you, after all of these years, come to terms with the fact that sometimes somebody is going to see you as the bad guy?
Well, I'm going to have to.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I mean, it would be you don't have to. It would be maybe easier for your life if because you can never dictate what other people are going to see about you.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah,
let's roll that out.
it just makes life easier if you're able to be okay with however anybody sees you.
I am willing to learn to do that, and I've already had to. It's just something I'm going to have to become more skillful with because, like you said, there's always going to be somebody.
Mhm.
And I don't really care to suffer needlessly because I'm believing that stuff when it comes up. So the only alternative is to work on being able to let go of that and quit tormenting myself with that when these things show up.
So how how are you going to go about letting go of that?
Well, I guess some of it's just learning to be aware in the moment when it's happening. This is what's happening. What I have been doing is often, not always, but often when these things come up, I remind myself of the affirmations that you've asked me to start practicing. So I do that. And there's something else. I cannot recall what the other thing is, but the affirmations are kind of a key point or kind of a central practice when it comes to that kind of stuff. And I don't, that's all I know to do. That whatever this other thing is, I'm forgetting. Set that aside for a moment. Affirmations and just learning to be aware in the moment when those things happen. I mean, it was last night or the night before, she got really upset with me and said something. I mean, she can be really vicious. And I mean, to the point that, Susanna is concerned about it, and
Mm,
we've had teachers say something about it. And
yeah.
she said something the other night that was just really barbed, and there was a reaction. And then, fortunately, hooray, there was this moment of, whoa, there's the reaction. What's happening right now? Pay attention. And that made it possible to step back from being hurt, getting upset, and then trying to sort of, use the parental strong arm on her.
Yeah. Good. So I think exactly what you said is really, really useful. Um, Another thing that I would suggest is when you're in a situation like that, yes, feel the sensations, feel whatever's arising, so that you are so present with the moment that you recognize that the story itself that you are already concocting for it is not actually real, right? In the moment, she says something, you have to interpret what she says as being barbed and um, setting you up as the bad guy again. Notice how much of that story is being reinforced and created by those sensations that you immediately feel in the body, right? So you feel that, and that is your every. I'm guessing that most of the times that you have had that I'm the bad guy narrative play out, you have had similar physical sensations in the body.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So it's like a classical conditioning thing. You feel that, and then you immediately recognize that this is me being the bad guy again. And it doesn't feel particularly pleasant.
Right.
And it sparks more of these similar thoughts that you know, this is how it is. But if you can recognize just the sensations, be completely with the sensations that are there, allowing them to just move out, express themselves, and if need be, like you can ask yourself in the moment, is this actually true? Is what she's saying about you true? And if not, then you know, if a random person came up on the street and said to you, you eat kittens every night, you wouldn't like, oh my God, I don't eat kittens. You wouldn't get defensive if there wasn't something there. So so recognizing, is this true? And look into it. No, I genuinely don't eat kittens, and this is all just, some old story that somebody is concocting, and there's no relevance in this moment to a story about eating kittens. And then the other thing is there still a part of you where it might actually have some sort of remnant of truth? Is there a part of you who at least believes that you eat kittens, right? Like maybe there's a little bit of guilt that you eat a pig, and the pig is, maybe a little bit, they have four legs, and there's crazy metaphor, but you get what I'm saying. Like, is there a way that you are still in some ways believing that that is actually true about you, that there is some element of the bad guy in there, that there is some element of truth behind the allegations.
So there has to be some degree of buy-in.
Yes, for it to be sticky, for it to be an issue. Yes, there's some part of you that is believing it, or at the very least that is, because it was such a lifelong identification, that there's something where that identification is the bell is rung every time something comes anywhere near it, because it's just so sensitive at this point. So it can be that, but really make sure that there's no actual or no actual belief there that you are still harboring some bad guy issues. And if you are, then acknowledge that. And it's not about rooting them out and, I'm going to make myself perfect. And it's not about that. As Pernilla says, we have to go into every room of the house and be okay with what's in every room of the house. So maybe there's a part of you that gets irritated and is, you know, uh, not always as nice as you could be in your most saintly incarnation. You know, recognize that, acknowledge the fact that it's there, come to terms with it, And then you can see, okay, well, what is it that's causing the irritation that's leading me to behave like that? But you have to first come to terms with the fact that it is the way it is without pushing against it, without being aversive to even those aspects of us that we feel are socially unacceptable or less than, uh, you know, less than desirable.
Okay.
Because it's also not, sorry, it's also not personal. Recognizing we can be with every room of the house because the house is not me, right? Like
Right.
if you start taking it that I am a bad guy because once every 360 days I get, angry and lose my temper and say something that I regret later, there's an idea there that this is me. I am a problem. I have been doing this every year now, and every 360 days I do this thing. You're making it personal. There might be a pattern that erupts like that volcano every 360 days. And it doesn't have to be a personalized issue where this is me and this is my problem and this is something that just defines me. No, no.
So I started to wonder and started to consider that maybe a good question to ask was, why do I need her approval? But then everything you just said in the last few minutes seems to completely undercut that. It seems to make that question irrelevant.
Yeah, you can ask though why you need her or anybody else's approval because that might come down to a similar issue.
Huh. Well, and okay, so I won't completely throw that question out the window, but it seems to me that if I'm not making it personal, if I'm not creating a story around it about, me and how flawed I am, et cetera, seems to kind of make the whole issue of someone's approval kind of irrelevant.
Well, it is, but that's why we have the two, like, I say that with the caveat that we don't want to use that as a bypassing tool, where you still feel like there's something wrong with you, but you use the logic of it to say, yeah, but of course, then that's just being personal and I don't have to, and then you can use that psychologically to just bypass what's really going on. So we don't want that. So it might be useful before you get to that point. Like I'm pointing to the fact that it's not personal for you to, to pull apart that knot, to let it start to loosen. But it might be useful to look into why is it that you need anybody's approval? A, is it because you do not have your full approval? This is you approving of every room in the house as though, you know, being okay with what's in every room. Is it if there's a need for somebody else to approve of you, means that there is an insecurity there about something where you need to be reassured that you're okay.
Classically, what that has always pointed to when I've looked into this in years past has been that it's a matter of getting someone else's approval to make up for the lack of self-approval.
Mhm. Exactly. So in what which are the rooms that are you're not able to approve of in yourself? What do you need the other person to tell you is okay about you that you don't believe is okay about you?
Well, with regards to her, it's it sounds so silly saying it out loud, but that frequently, I mean, there are other issues that crop up here and there, but I think probably one of the big ones is I have to play the role of a parent,
Hmm.
which means I have to do certain things, and I need her to cooperate.
Hmm.
We're doing something to look after her. Like, yeah, I know you don't want to go to bed now, but you need to because you fall asleep all day long, on the couch. You're not getting enough sleep. And I go to see that this is taken care of. She gets upset. She gets nasty. She starts saying things. And so it's, and I'm not sure where the deficiency is in all of that because it really just comes down to being a parent. She doesn't like it. And I guess when somebody doesn't like what they're doing, what I'm doing, that's taken as they don't like me. It's taken personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Also look into why it feels not okay to be um she's irritated about you. Let's say it this way. She gets mad at you for telling her that she needs to do things to that are healthy for her, building up healthy habits. You're doing what you feel like is the good parental role.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it that you aren't comfortable with the normal ramifications of a child, even a 16-year-old child, getting upset at the parent for making them do something that they don't see the value of, even though the parent has the maybe broader picture of it that they don't understand yet. You know what I'm saying? Like you're coming at from the vantage point where you can see that she is not sleeping enough, needs to get more rest. You're trying to keep her on track that way. She's coming from the 16-year-old perspective where I just want to stay up and be on the phone all night.
Right.
I don't see an issue. I sleep when I sleep. That's fine. She doesn't see the issue where you see the issue.
Right.
You're doing what you feel is the best thing for her self benefit. Is it not okay though for her to feel like you are imposing something upon her and feel resentful towards you because you're still doing what you think is the right thing to do? Can you be okay with her taking that however she takes it, with the knowledge that you're still coming from the place that you feel is the best parental place? It's like you have to take your dogs to the vet, and the dogs don't like going to the vet. But
Right.
they have to go to the vet and get their teeth cleaned and nails clipped and all that. And they rebel against it. And they might even sulk for a while afterwards that you bastard, you took me there again. I hate you. Right? Like,
Right.
like that might be a thing, but in your, wisdom of a bigger picture, that was the right thing to do. And I'm assuming that you're okay with them sulking every now and then and being like, do you know what I mean? Like because you did the right thing.
Right.
Why is that not working with her? Where where you have a hang up with her that it's not okay for her to feel that same kind of resentment towards you for doing what you feel like is just as healthy of a thing for her as taking the dogs to the vet.
I think it goes back to what you said earlier about the buy-in. There is some part of me that believes that some element of how she feels about me as a result of having to go to bed or get off the phone or help with housework or whatever, that on some level, I believe that there's some truth to that. It could be wrong, but that's all I'm really seeing.
Mm-hmm. And it could be that. It could be as simple as that. getting used to that discomfort of having somebody upset with you or just straight up not like you, even though if it comes to that, right? Like as much
Right.
as you can like and love a person, if they are feeling a certain way towards you, you have no control over that.
Right.
So can you be okay? Can you be with the sensations of her just being really irritated with you?
I can learn to. I can one incident at a time. I can practice it and
Yeah.
learn to move towards it.
Yeah. And that's all we can do as far as being able to be with what's there, right? It's just moment by moment, feeling into it, seeing if it's as bad as you really think that it is, if you don't put any more stories into it. If you're just there with the contraction in the chest and the feeling, the throat, wherever it's showing up for you in that moment, is this okay? Is this sensation that's showing up actually in any way related to the situation itself? Is a contraction in the chest, feeling in the throat, even feelings in the face, wherever it shows up, is that actually in any way related to her saying something about you or thinking something about you?
Well, it looks like it is in the sense that I say something to her, you need to do this. She gets upset. I hear what she's saying, and there's a reaction here. I mean, it seems like there's a causal relationship.
We could say there's like a cause and effect thing, but that sensation, does it really play any role in that whole situation? Like, is it doing anything relevant or practical?
The
That
sensation.
contraction.
Does it do anything relevant or practical? No, if anything, it's problematic because it tends to give rise to reactions on my part.
It does. So can you feel that though, and just recognize that this contraction is not, we can say that there's like a vague causal relationship, that it shows up around the same time that she says something to you that brings up a similar feeling of um I'm the bad guy. I'm being blamed for something I didn't do, any of that. But can you also see that if you didn't have that issue, that sensation would not be there? So her saying, I hate you, you are, an absolute jerk, and I never want to see you again. If you don't have in you any hooks into that, into her thinking that you should be a certain way or seeing you a certain way, even those words wouldn't spark that sensation. It only does because of the past history that you have had, because of the beliefs that are currently on board, right? The It's like there's like a metaphor that's formulating here, and it hasn't quite come up yet. I can feel it coming though. But it's like this isn't it. It hasn't. It definitely hasn't formulated.
Disappointing me.
I'm sorry. Okay, okay. This is maybe not the best one, but we'll see where this goes.
Okay.
Um, I tell you to light a candle in your room. So then you will go and pick up a book of matches and strike a match and light a candle. If you didn't, if I just said, Darrell, light a candle, and you didn't have in you the idea that it was what I was talking about, if you didn't speak English, if you didn't have a candle or a match handy, if you didn't have any interest in following what I say, if you were just, feeling particularly belligerent and combative and like, no, any of that was different, that candle would not be lit. My words did not actually light that candle.
Oh, okay. I
Not
see.
the same as those sensations. Her words do not create those sensations. Those sensations
Ah,
can only show up because there is this whole undercurrent of buy-in and of belief that is creating those.
right. It requires a very specific set of causes and conditions that have cultivated or have developed over a period of years here because of personal experience, history, all of the things that go into whatever makes up a person.
Yes.
So,
Precisely.
so it's, you could say in a way, and maybe this is correct, maybe it's not, but understanding the idea now, it actually sounds more like something on the level of accident or coincidence.
Yes, exactly. That's when I say that those sensations are not really related to what she has said. It's in that way that it's, as you put it, it's causes and conditions that all have to be in place for that sensation to arise because there is all of that stuff there. Otherwise, if she said that to me, nothing. I have no connection with her. There's nothing. The causes and conditions for those sensations to arise are not here.
It's like somebody getting mad at you, uh, playing a game of pool. You get to the very end, they lose, and they're mad at you because they're saying they lost because of the very first shot you took.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Oh,
It makes sense now. See, I've heard Pernil talk about this before in the past, and there were these moments of kind of getting it for a moment, or almost getting it but not quite.
yep.
I get it, and then I think about it a little bit later, and I don't understand it now. It's evaporated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it makes sense.
Amazing.
So,
Amazing. Very happy. So that was, I don't think that was the metaphor that was on its way, but it worked. So I'm happy about that.
well, you'll know if you get to later tonight, say like 1 a.m. and you're getting up to go to the bathroom, and suddenly it appears. If it doesn't show up sometime later, especially at some absurd hour under ridiculous circumstances, then then you'll know.
Yeah, completely, completely. It was a functional metaphor, so it was the metaphor that was supposed to be there. So that's great.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm glad it worked. So yeah, that's the idea that all of these things have a life of their own. They have an existence of their own that is not directly related. It doesn't have to be the case. There's something else which is leading to it. And that something else is in this case, all of those beliefs that are being tuned into and bought into and have been believed and bought into for so many years.
It seems like what this is saying, though, is that being true, that at another slightly higher level, that these reactions are really, at very least, unimportant, possibly irrelevant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Which is why we don't have to make stories out of them and make them into something that is really about me and my journey and something I really need to work through. It's just some old bullshit that hasn't been let go of.
Wow. Now, when you put it like that, wow. Huh. Got it. God, when you put it like that, then it's really apparent that it has it has almost nothing, if not absolutely nothing, to do with what's happening in the moment. It was set in
Exactly.
play a long time ago. I mean,
Yes.
that could be something that, my mom said something really rotten to me when I was 7, and it really stung and stuck with me. And now here it
Gotcha.
is. In fact, it's interesting. I'm glad we're having this conversation because there was something about the Buddha's teachings about causality where
Mhm.
he's trying to communicate this idea, and I never could quite
Interesting.
fully get it,
Yeah.
because he talks about the different types of causality. Now it's all really clear.
Amazing. Yeah.
So that's cool.
Wonderful.
Now
So
it's just a matter of really taking it in, taking
yeah,
it in and getting it in deeply and integrating it.
absolutely.
So it becomes something that's lived with.
Yeah. And that's why when I say like every moment when you're in a situation with her, to ask, is this true? Is this really happening right now? The way that I think this is happening, the way that I think she is saying something about me and it hurts and I feel it and is this really happening? Is this the way that it really is? Or is she just saying words in a room and I'm standing there, right? Like how
Right.
much more is really happening than that? And how much is it that you are creating out of these assumptions about how the relationship should be, how it's not, how it really is, how how there's something about you because of all of the colorations of the past, the time that your mother said something when you were 6, all of that stuff. How does all of that relate to this moment? Is any of that really relevant right here with what's here?
Well, I mean, everything we just discussed, obviously not, but I can already kind of see how it's going to go in the moment, at least for a while, where the emotions and the feelings in the body are going to give it this sense of substance and reality. It's
And
going
that's why
to,
you investigate it. Right, exactly. But that's why you investigate it when it's there and go, I'm feeling it right now. Is this really real? Is this really a relevant reaction to what's happening? Is what I think is happening right now really true? Does this sensation mean what I think it means? It's really taking it apart to you think that those sensations mean that you are the bad guy,
but they don't.
but they
It's
don't.
it's the same principle, but instead of between two
Yeah,
people, two beings talking or two beings interacting, it's all happening in here.
yeah, exactly.
Huh. Huh.
The candle didn't get lit because I said Darrell light the candle. But does
Right.
the candle being lit actually even signify anything? Does it signify that it's time to meditate or that, you were told by somebody and you're such the type of person who does what they're told all the time without question or, it's all reading something into a fact that there is a candle that is burning right this moment. That's it. Everything that you put on that is something else that you're creating. It's another story that you're creating.
Wow. With that thought in mind, the story that's being created, would that also be true of the idea that one of the things that provokes that reaction on my end is this incredible dislike for having to be an authority figure?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're clearly not okay with the ramifications of being that authority figure.
No.
You have, to do that, it comes with the child or the dog or whoever else getting kind of pissy at you sometimes. You're making them do something that is for their better good, but they don't see it that way. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to be an authority figure. You don't have to tell people like you don't have to have a law to tell people to wear seatbelts. If everybody actually believed that seatbelts were the best thing for them, you wouldn't need that law, right? Like these things are there because somebody else does not recognize that this thing might actually be for their higher good. This might actually be for their benefit. They just can't see it. And you have to be able to put up with people going, fuck you, it's my right to not wear a seatbelt and like do their thing.
All
Like
right.
you gotta accept that. That's part of the authority role to make rules that you think are beneficial and then have people, screaming at you that you're taking away the liberties. Same sort of thing. Right? You're just in the microcosm of it.
Right. So then to kind of review all of that in brief, in that moment, it's time to get off the phone and get ready for bed. Reaction, unpleasant words and energy, and then a reaction here. And the reaction here really isn't about what's being said there. It's about all of the things that have been built up in here over time that create a sensitivity to those.
Absolutely. Yeah. How do you feel about authority figures?
Ooh, boy, you asked a big one. As I don't like them.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I do not like authority figures.
Yeah.
And there's the wonderful added wrinkle to that of starting at a very young age, and still to this day, by watching adults and what they did, I realized that most adults weren't adults. They were just overgrown kids. They were
Absolutely.
clueless and really often had no idea what they were doing. And so I really resented that authority, because why would I listen to the authority of an idiot?
Yep. Well, I get it. I totally get it. I've struggled, as we've talked about before, with own authority issues for a long, 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 long time.
I'm
So
glad you understand.
I completely understand. I completely get where you're coming from. But it's that thing where you then can you be the bad guy in that way? Like you see it that authority figures are problems. You are in a position as a parent where you at sometimes have to be an authority figure.
Yeah.
Can you be that problem figure? Can you put on the dictator hat now and then and play the role?
I need to get a t-shirt that says benevolent dictator.
Dictator, exactly. So can you be okay playing that role?
Well, for my own well-being, peace of mind, and ability to let go of all of the things that go into building up an identity that isn't there, it's going to really be kind of a necessity. Am I willing to do that? Yeah.
Good. And it's also relevant to recognize that even the ideas that we have about authority aren't necessarily true. We're built, it's a concept that we have, right? We have to question all of our concepts and beliefs. Our
Ooh.
idea that authority sucks, that there that there's it's a bunch of children who are overgrown children who are just imposing their will on us and all that. There may be levels of that where that's true, but it's always a convenient shorthand that we're using. We're never really interacting with the person in the moment. We're
Ah,
interacting with the label of authority figure,
you're right.
which isn't necessarily even borderline relevant to that particular authority figure about this particular issue in this particular moment right here.
Wow. Okay. Boy, the level of unraveling that all of this entails. It makes me think of the old bit about peeling the onion.
Yeah. Yeah, there's layer after layer because we it's the same thing that we do with everything. Like, we talk about trees all the time for that reason, because it's like you have the idea that you have seen a tree before and you know what a tree is immediately. And so you don't actually see any particular tree ever. It's just this assumption that, well, that's a tree. I know what that is. You've used that label over every tree that you've ever seen and kind of painted them all together. It's
Right.
it's a convenient shorthand to be able to easily grasp something, make sense of it without using too much brain power. And then we know that thing is probably not going to eat us. It's a tree. Okay, I can just ignore it. Or, I'm hungry, and that is a kind of tree that seems to grow apples. So that might actually be beneficial to recognize. I know that's an apple tree. I know I can eat that, and those apples are probably not poisonous. So we have these like categorizations that make life easy to navigate, but it's also problematic when we have these categorizations like all authority is bad, or
Right.
I am a certain way, or that all of that particular group is a certain way, which is how we end up with stereotypes that lead to all sorts of, racism, oppression, and all that stuff, because we're just using this category to just overly simplify an entire group of whatever. And instead, it's recognizing that every single person, every single tree, every single instant is different. Even take
That's
somebody who you like really despise and think they're like the absolute worst person who's ever walked the face of the earth. There are moments that you could probably interact with that person and really be like, okay, right? The person is not an absolutely deplorable wreck every single waking moment of their life in some way. You could have like one moment where you speak to them and like laugh at something they say and think, oh, that was actually pretty funny. Or, yeah, those, whatever. Like really, really taking it in the granular sense. Then we're not interacting with anything through concepts and through those labels. But we very rarely ever live that way.
Well, I don't want to go down I don't want to go down this particular path too far, but it seems like if we're really going to live what the time we have fully in the most honest, authentic way, that we have to strive towards doing that as much as we can to the best of our ability.
Hmm.
Otherwise, basically, we've gone through, from cradle to grave, we've gone through a waking dream.
Absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely true. We're very rarely actually interacting with anything that's in front of us. We're acting with our own perceptions of it. And largely those perceptions are those stereotypes, those, categorizations that just make it very easy to say, you know, she's an angry 16-year-old, Okay, but you're not actually seeing the person who in that moment is saying certain things and feeling certain things. But there's this dynamic of I am the authoritarian parent in this moment and I don't like that. She is the belligerent 16-year-old who is saying certain things and I don't like that. We've just summarized something which is unsummarizable into two little sentences, and then that's the way that we interact.
Does it seem to you that it is a effective or worthwhile approach in terms of stepping out of all of that preconditioned stuff that's happening to try to see her for whoever she is rather than all of the sort of mental lenses that are being used?
Yeah, I mean it's never 100% possible because of the way that we're built, right? You can never ever see somebody truly 100% clearly with no biases or anything.
Sure.
But that's largely what we're doing with all of this process. Every fetter is just one of those lenses that we're using um, to make some sort of simplification out of the experience. And so every time you take what I take to be a me is just a gross over exaggeration or simplification of certain sensations and thoughts that are arising in patterns, that becomes simplified as a me. The sensations that arise and the thoughts that arise about wanting a piece of chocolate cake is an we say, well, I am craving a piece of chocolate cake. Well, that's an oversimplification for the actual moment that is here. The idea that there is a television out there and a me here who is watching the television and we are separate things, that are six, oversimplification of the experience of these things arising in the same space. Her being whoever you think she is and you being whoever you think you are just oversimplifications of that entire dynamic. The entire experience of however you think she is in that moment is going to be an oversimplification, but you can be there more and more and more with what's there, like what's actually there, without your the less reactivity that you have in any way to her saying anything, whether it's the most cruel, the most biggest lie, whatever else. The more you can just be with the raw experience of her saying whatever words come out of her mouth and be okay with it, the fewer filters you're going to be seeing her with,
Okay.
the less assumptions you put on why she's saying what she says, what you think she means by it, what you think she's trying to gain by it, how she's trying to manipulate you, or how she's trying to, how could she possibly think this? I didn't. all of those stories, if you take all of those off, all those self-referential things, and you're just there in the moment with the raw experience of somebody who is sitting there, maybe an face that, you're interpreting as angry, saying some words to you that you're interpreting as being really biting and barbed and hurtful, and you just hear it for what it is, you can actually start to experience it in a very different way, maybe without a lot of the emotional sensations, the reactivity, the thoughts about how it relates to you. It's just this creature who is expressing something in this way. And then you can actually start to feel differently for her.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would like that. That's something that I've considered before. I don't know what everyone else. So I know you said last time we're talking that. Sorry, everyone. It's gonna be noisy. That it's not possible to just put an absolute final cap or end point on any of the fetters. But with the idea of trying to move towards fetters 4 and 5, because at one point in this conversation earlier, something about what we were just talking about, it kind of hit me that some of what's going on here is actually aversion and desire.
Mhm.
And you could spend forever just trying to constantly unravel all of this just by fetters 1, 2, and 3, or fetter 2, or whatever is appropriate. But at some point in time, you would hit diminishing returns because there's this aversion and desire, let alone all the other things beyond that, that are functioning that haven't even been touched on. So all that to say is how maybe this isn't necessary, maybe it's completely unnecessary, but is there any value in kind of putting a period on the end of the sentence about the first 3 fetters, or do we just tip our hat and say thanks and move on?
Yeah, it's always looking at every moment of identification when it's there. So if you're finding that you're not having much of any first fetter identification, then of course you don't have to worry about looking into first fetter identification now. If you find that your second fetter stuff doesn't seem to be causing a lot of issues at this moment, then, you know, put it aside for now. Work with what's here. You will find potentially that a lot of what we take to be 4 and 5 is actually coming from fetter 2. That there's a lot of, I don't like this person saying this to me. Well, okay, lovely, but why don't you like that person saying that to you? It's because you have some belief that, well, I don't like what they say because it actually touched a nerve because I believe what they say. Okay, well, let's go back to Fetter 2. Let's look at some of that. So 2, 4, and 5 are very similar, very much connected in these ways. And so the reason why we emphasize doing so much Fetter 2 work is that it actually makes 4 and 5 so much easier to work with once some of the Fetter 2 stuff is kind of seen, at least being worked with more or less, out of the way or lessened or loosened. But it's not to say that there's any point where you are going to be necessarily completely free of ever looking at anything ever again. You never know when something is going to pop back up and it's like, ooh, thought I was done with that one, but here we go. Okay, so let's
Huh.
just look into it because it's just another form of identification. Again, they're not, the fetters aren't real things. If they were, then it would be super easy. Because it's like, all right, I saw through it, bubble burst, done, unlock the chain, it's gone, that's it. Never comes back again. But it's not. They're just ways of identification that you see the mechanism happening, you see how it works. Now and then you might still get back into an old thought pattern that seems to create it again. Fine, look again. But it also doesn't mean that you have to be through, like completely done, spotless for the first 3 fetters before you move on to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. because you are going through all 10 fetters all day, every day.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah. So
Huh.
the way we work with it is very much not linear. So it is really up for everybody to work with all 10 at any moment, any day, whatever is arising in that moment that day.
Well, a couple of things.
Mhm.
The first one, this seems important, or at least needs to be said.
Yeah.
When you were talking just a few minutes ago about, if there's not much Fetter 1 identification or Fetter 2 identification, there's obviously, based on this conversation, obviously there still is a pretty high degree of Fetter 2 identification going on. And then as far as Fetter 1 goes, it's not like it was, say, almost a year ago, or even maybe 6 or 8 months ago. It has become more subtle. So there's definitely a lot that's changed with regard to the first fetter.
Mhm.
Second fetter, that still feels very much like a work in progress.
Mhm.
I don't know about fetter 3, I really don't. But, you know, if not now, when?
Right. But remember that they're all interrelated too. So it's
Right,
very
okay.
possible that having a sixth fetter experience, like we've talked to people recently actually who have like since we've been putting out the sixth fetter material, people have been doing that. And people who haven't felt like they've seen through the first fetter before have had major first fetter shifts by doing sixth fetter practices because
Okay.
the sense of self is still just a more subtle sense of self that we have with the sixth fetter, and if you can break down some of that, sometimes the bigger identification of the first fetter also goes with it. So it can be useful all along the line to be working with the higher fetters. It does help, if you're in a place where you are, where you have definitely seen through the first fetter, at least in multiple different ways. You've had many different experiences. You recognize every time you look for it, it's not there. Your actual daily change of experience is in some ways different, though perhaps subtle, um, to be expected. All of those things being the case, that makes it so much easier to work with the later fetters. And the only reason why we say that it's good to be through one, or at least, have some seeing through self before you're working with the others, is because it's very easy to take like 4 and 5 very personally, right? Like those things, it, I really believe what they say about me. And I'm really angry because they really said that. And, like, damn it, I know this is the case. Of course, if you're coming with that level of personal identification, it's very hard to start to see that the other person is operating out of their own little bubble of reality and you're operating out of your own little bubble of reality, and that none of it has actual any basis, any root in anything, because there is nobody in either of those bubbles of reality. That there is just a process of reactivity and causes and conditions here interacting with a process of reactivity of uh, causes and conditions over there, and that these two bubbles are interacting. Like, actually, I was talking to somebody in a one-to-one recently, and I was saying it reminds me of um, there have been some. I don't know if you've seen some of the like Instagram videos recently where people take Chat GPT voice chat on two different phones side by side and have them talk to each other and just start having a conversation. And it's just two AIs having a conversation, debating stuff back and forth with each other, or like, yes, but actually, I think, and they're like interacting, and it's like, this is exactly who we are. This is exactly what we're doing all the time. But the chat bots know that they're not real, that they're not like a conscious self that's located within the chat bot. They'll say, I'm just a language model, blah, blah, blah. We don't have that. We go, oh, but this is me and I know this. And this is really, like I get really invested in this argument. And so having that level of recognizing that actually this is just like a form of AI talking with another form of AI, and that alone defuses so much of the 4-5 issue.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, you know, as far as Feder One goes, I think that's going to be an ongoing practice and process for a very, very long time. I just heard the other day, I forget what video it was, but they were talking about, oh, I think it was in the very first Feder group video. I think it was you who mentioned a story about this Zen Buddhist monk who had had this moment of insight and saw through self, but he kept doing the
Mm.
inquiry for years and years and
Yeah,
years.
yeah, yeah.
And it was funny because, or interestingly coincidental, because before I even saw that, I had decided some while back that, trying to find who's making the decision, trying to see what's going on at that moment of an apparent decision happening, taking place. I'm just going to keep looking at that. I'm just going to keep digging into that. And it may be something I do for the rest of my life. I don't know, but I'm going to be doing it for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So first Feder, much to my surprise, wasn't all that long ago that I wouldn't have been able to say this comfortably. I feel pretty comfortable with where things sit. Feder two, I don't know. You're going to have to be the one to say because you're going to be more objective. Feder three, I don't even have any idea because honestly, it's weird to say. In all of this, I hardly think about it, and when I do, I think about it in the very classic traditional sense:
Yeah,
attachment to rites and rituals.
yeah.
You know, and that's I don't know that doesn't seem to really translate well to how you and Pernilla look at and work with the third Feder. So I don't even know where things stand with regard to that for myself.
And just notice throughout the day all the times that you feel like you're doing something for a purpose and how that purpose reinforces a sense of narrative self moving through time.
Say that again.
Yeah. Look, anytime that you feel like you're doing something for a purpose and how that reinforces the sense of a personal self who is moving through time.
So anytime you're doing something for a purpose,
Yeah. Our
do
most our most classic example is like dieting to lose weight. So like I'm going to refrain from eating this piece of chocolate cake now because I really want to lose some weight so that I will be thinner and healthier in, a year from now. All of that, there's so much identification in that because A, there's an idea that thinner equals better. There's an idea that chocolate cake equals fat me. There's, an idea that I am the one who is going to be improved in some way if I weigh 5 pounds less rather than 5 pounds more. There's an idea of a me who is going to be the same me, but slightly different in a year from now, who is, going to reap the benefits of my not eating the chocolate cake right now.
well, it seems to me that if somebody takes the general approach that I've decided to with regards to the first Feder, eventually the first Feder is going to the third Feder is going to crumble.
Mm.
The first Feder is going to pull the foundation out from underneath the third Feder.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But notice also, if there are still some things that are supporting the first Feder that way by having
Sure.
these little habits that, I do this thing because it creates some.
There we go again. Almost certain they're not barking at anyone who's actually there.
That's hilarious. But yeah, notice if there's anything that you do, which is creating some sense of identification about even just the awakening practice, right? Or the like, I'm doing the inquiry in order to become a better, more enlightened, less burdened, less reactive version of myself. there is even the belief in that there is someone there who is going to improve, who has been doing this for decades and who has been improving all along the way, and who is going to get something out of it. And the reason why we have these pairs of fetters, so third pairs with nine, because kind of the antidote to that is just moving with instinct, with flow, with intuition, so that instead of I can't eat the chocolate cake now because I'm going to lose weight, does the body actually even want the chocolate cake right now? If you really tune into it, there can be a sensation of like, you know what, I actually don't even want that. Like I'm really eating it because I need self-soothing, because there's a taste memory that showed up in my mouth for right now, and I'm taking that taste memory as like a craving that I actually want this thing, and now I'm having this thing. Or you know, I'm doing this for some other reason that, it's a birthday and I've been told that you have to have cake on a birthday. And if you don't, right? So like I have to eat the cake whether I want it or not. Like we have all of these things built up around it. But actually, if you feel into it, you very well might find that, no, actually, I really don't even want that. I thought I was eating it, but it was just because I was kind of depressed and sugar makes me feel better. Like what is really at the need? Oh, you know what? Actually, I think I just need a glass of water. Or actually, I think actually like an apple would be just as suitable. Whatever it is, or that no, actually, the cake really sounds great right now, and that like there's just this complete enjoyment of this cake in this moment with no other hooks attached. However it's showing up is showing up, but it's being in that flow where whatever arises, and it's okay as long as you're not putting extra. This is something about me. Okay. I The cake sounds really good right now, and I'm gonna eat the cake, and I'm gonna enjoy the cake, but I'm going to feel so guilty about it, and I'm gonna like do an extra 10,000 steps tomorrow to make up for it. No, we're putting more and more stories and more hooks and more identification onto it. So coming at it from the absolute feeling of the body, just having cake or not having cake, but not having any sort of stories around it or any sort of doing it for a reason or doing it with a certain caveat and, making bargains about it or any of that. That's all identification. Um, and that's how the two are related in that way.
Well, I made a note of it. I mean, it sounds worthwhile to take on, to add to what I'm already doing. So
Excellent.
that's fine. I have no problem with it. So then I guess we're at a point where we can begin looking, or next time we talk, we can begin to talk about 4 and 5 then.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And everything that you just said, and actually that whole conversation, it seems to be that's what Chuladasa said something once about how I can't remember his actual words, but the gist of it was that waking up is not something where there's an end point.
Mhm.
And a lot of people get that idea, and I think especially with like classical Buddhism, it kind of creates that idea, that impression, but that there's not an end point. It's something that can be deepened infinitely.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Every day I'm still doing some sort of inquiry. There's like, it's like every moment there's something there to be investigated and just feeling these sensations in a different way, breaking apart something else. I mean, there's always, always, always something there to be seen and investigated. Um, so yeah, I mean, even like this morning, I was lying in bed and there was a thought about I went to the eye doctor, or not the eye doctor, but the optometrist today. I need new glasses. And then also had thought I'd try going back to contacts again after like 10 years. So hence this. And
Ah,
yeah, yeah.
that explains it. It wasn't what I thought it was this whole
It
time.
wasn't the drooping, it was lack of glasses.
Yes.
But, but this is so funny. But but the funny thing was They called yesterday to say that my glasses came in. Could I come in to try them out? So I said sure. I said and they said, can you come in 9:30 this morning? So I said fine. Went to put it in the calendar and realized that I already had a 10 o'clock appointment there for the fitting for the contacts. So it was just like, perfect. They're like back to back, like in the same office. Like that's great. And I had this moment this morning where I woke up and I thought about it, and there was the idea came up that I should feel like this is so fortuitous, right? Like everything worked out, like both at the same time, like back to back. It's just going to work out perfectly time wise, like how blessed I am and all that. And I didn't feel any of that, right? It was just like the kind of matter of fact thing. But even more than that, there was this little sensation in the belly that was kind of like, taken as like, no, 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 it hasn't happened yet. Don't get your hopes up. Don't get, like, don't get ahead of yourself, like that kind of thing, which goes so far back. Like this whole not this whole issue of uh basically always waiting for the other shoe to drop, always waiting for something to go wrong, all of that. And so I just laid there in bed. Like these thoughts happened. The sensation was there, and it was just exactly what I asked you. What is this sensation actually about? Like, what is it actually doing? Is this sensation in any way changing the actual situation? Is it in any way related to having two back-to-back appointments? Is the sensation in the belly have anything to do with the sense of unease that, maybe it's going to be not enough time and it's not going to play out right and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all of that was taking away from the moment where none of it was actually happening. I was just lying in bed, but a thought comes up and a sensation comes up, and then it tries to be made into something else. And it's something that is, again, it's like just as old as your bad guy thing. And it's just recognizing that, yeah, it's just a sensation that is ostensibly about not getting your hopes up, not being disappointed, protection about, never being, disappointed and having to get hurt that way. But all it's doing is in the moment making it so that you can never have any sort of enjoyment or even just neutrality, because
Huh,
there's always a negative slant to it. And that
right.
sensation is always just being this kind of little thorn that's not actually benefiting anything in any way or having anything constructive to do with the situation. So, like, I was telling Pernille about it afterwards, and like she said, it could be like I could go into it from the standpoint that everything is going to work out. Everything has already worked out. It's beautiful, and just be completely open and happy about all of it until it does or it doesn't. Right. But instead, have for decades come from the opposite side where everything is presumed to suck until it's proven that it's okay.
Right.
So like I can feel the relief of things actually working out, and then never the discomfort of disappointment if something doesn't. I just assume everything is going to fail before it actually does. So I'm preemptively protecting myself to keep from getting hurt. And it's just so old. But the difference is now I'm not getting caught in it like I used to. It's just seen as, oh, there's that sensation again. Oh, there's that kind of thought again. And then just, instead of just even just looking at it and just letting it go, which also works, it's really interesting to just like do the investigation again, do the inquiry. Is there something more in there that also, needs my love and attention or compassion? Is there something in there that still is a current of, or like a kernel of fear about something? Like, what is underneath that feeling of insecurity about being hurt or being disappointed? There's so it's just using that as a moment to just work with anything that shows up, because you just never know. Um, it's just taking it in a very casual way. It's not making it into something more than it is. It's just, oh, well, that's there. Let's look at it.
Huh. Well, that's something else that, and I'm hoping that going back through the videos will help with this, is becoming more skilled at inquiry because it's gotten better, but there's still more, probably at least half the time, maybe more, where something will come up and it's like, okay, well, this is an opportunity to inquire into what's going on here and do some investigation, and then the next thing is, okay, what do I do? What's appropriate here?
Right.
Just kind of stall out there.
Right.
So, was it like that for you? I mean, was there a point in time where learning how to do the inquiry was it wasn't something that came naturally?
I think I could probably say that, though I've always been just very, very, I guess, like inquisitive down to like sort of the minutia of things, which is why I've kind of taken to doing the inquiry the way that I do, and why I seem to have some sort of a knack with creating inquiries like that, because it's just sort of natural proclivity to be like really hyper uh
Analytical?
analytical, yeah, and like in a like really dissecting way, like not
Yeah,
just yeah, not just like cerebrally analytical, but like
right.
really digging into things and questioning exactly what the experience is in every moment of all the parts that we take for granted. And the more meditation I did and the more inquiry I did, the more I just got used to recognizing all the places where I was taking something for granted, where I was interacting through the concept as opposed to the actual direct experience, or where I was assuming something based on other things where there was no reason to be assumed that that was to be assumed. It's like, how can I break this down even further, basically, and really get down to what's here?
Well, I've had that same natural tendency, but I guess perhaps I haven't done it quite to the level that you have because I mean, I was always breaking things down as a kid. And, well, why is this? How does this work?
Yep.
And you know, but apparently there's some difference in our the way our minds work, even though there's some similarities. That I guess it came more naturally for you. So,
It's a fluke, it's just how it happens to work out.
well, I know that it's creeping up on 7 or 8 o'clock,
Yeah.
but and we can always resume this conversation another time. But for me, the big question has been how to get better at inquiry. And right now, the only thing I really know to do is to just I was doing it anyway, but go back through all of those videos a little at a time and just kind of take note, write things down, and
Yeah. I think that's it. And just remember, and the more you get used to doing it throughout the day, which I think at this point you're probably pretty uh comfortable with. I'm assuming that the reminder to do it, in during the day is what's helpful. So once you get used to just kind of it being the normal thing in your daily life, not just sitting on a cushion for a certain period of the day, but like
right.
really integrating it in the moment, it's just really about what am I experiencing? Well, what do I think I'm experiencing right now? What am I actually experiencing right now? Are these two the same thing? And depending on, it depends on what kind of inquiry you're trying to do. Like the second fetter stuff is a little trickier, especially by yourself, because you're we have a lot of blind spots that you're really trying to see through, and sometimes you
Right.
just need somebody else there to help out with the blind spots.
Yes.
That's just the thing, unfortunately. Um, but so many of the other parts of the inquiry is just really breaking down, why do I feel what I'm feeling? Why do I think I feel what I'm feeling? Why am I reacting this way? And without going immediately to story about it, it's just noticing what's happening in the body, what is happening in the mind, what kind of thoughts are showing up. Do they trace back to some bigger issue, some grander theme in your life, some belief about you or about this kind of situation, all of that. And then noticing, does that have any actual relevance in this moment? Or is this something that I'm adding to it unnecessarily? What is really here in this moment? And using that as kind of a basis is really potent.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And I tried to jot down what I could, but I'm just going to have to go back through and I pick that up from the video and get the rest of it. And and it's not all going to happen at once. I mean,
Hmm.
it all starts with, okay, there's a need to be able to do inquiry more skillfully and efficiently, to a finer degree, et cetera. Okay, so once that shows up, then now you've got that to build on, and do things like asking about it and get curious about it, and you know look around, whether it's in books or on the internet or videos, and see what other people have to say. So I guess in short, it's just a learning process.
It is. It is. And we do have to wrap up, but I did want to also just throw in because I was going to bring it up before, and then it was like we got down some different other rabbit holes. But the thing about motivation, I would just
Oh yeah.
leave you to inquire into when you have the idea that like, I should be motivated to do this thing. I love playing guitar, I love doing music, whatever, it brings me joy, I enjoy it, and yet I have no motivation for it. Ask yourself, why is it important to feel that motivation now? Like, why, what do you feel like you are going to be getting out of it that you don't have without it? Are you forcing something that just isn't relevant in this moment because there's an idea that it used to be relevant and I enjoyed it back then, so I should still be able to enjoy it now? And really looking for like, why is it that you're trying to create a sense of motivation for something? Like I get if it's like, this is your job and you're being paid to do it, and I just can't get up the motivation to do my job, and I understand that there's like some more of a pull there. But when it's especially for something that you feel like you enjoy but you can't get motivated for it, why is that a problem? Is it because it's taken as being like an issue to not have motivation because we have a cultural bias that feels like I should be doing something at all times and I should be motivated, and if I'm not interested in doing something, that means I'm depressed and all of that? Or is it that there's an idea that, I should be wanting to do this thing because I used to enjoy it? Now, what purpose do you think it's actually serving for you or would serve for you if you did have that motivation? And is it okay for you not to have the motivation right now? Recognizing that everything is that temporary, impersonal arising and decaying, or arising and disappearing. There are times when the motivation for one thing might come up. You indulge in it in that moment then and really, get the most out of it. And if it goes down, there's no reason to push it or force it. You just allow either something else to take over the motivation, or, the motivation for something else to arise, or just no. Is it okay to just be sitting in a wall? I mean, sitting in a room looking at a wall? Do you have to have the motivation to do something else? Is the motivation that's currently there to just sit in a room and look at a wall? Like are we thinking that motivation has to be directed in this way? And if my real motivation is just to sit and read a book or just surf websites right now, that's not okay. It has to be looking like this to be what's underneath that. So that's
Okay.
where I would point you to start looking at for that.
Okay. Well, and I know the answer to a number of those already. The only problem is, that would keep us on even longer, and you need to go. So we can either pick it up at a later time, or I can shoot you an email, and you can just hang on to it. And we can discuss it when we have the time. So
Yeah, because I think it's a really good one to dig into also. But yeah, yeah. So we can definitely talk about it more next time too.
Okay, well, cool. I'm gonna go deal with these insane dogs.
Enjoy that.
All right, I'll talk to you after
Thank you
bed.
so much. Yep. Have a great night.
Bye.
Bye.